The Earth defense ship horizon cut through the darkness of space like a silver blade. Commander Jack Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the view screen as they approached the Velen star system. 20 years had passed since humanity made first contact with alien life. 20 years of learning, adapting, and proving themselves worthy of a place among the stars. Jack was a tall man with gray streaks running through his dark hair. He had seen combat during the border wars and diplomacy during the integration period. Today, he hoped for the latter. The Velans had invited Earth to witness something special, something they claimed would change everything humanity understood about defensive technology. "We're approaching the boundary now, Commander," said Lieutenant Danny Pierce from the tactical station. Danny was young, barely 30, but his sharp eyes missed nothing. He had a talent for seeing patterns that others overlooked. Jack nodded. "Slow to quarter speed. Let's not seem too eager." The bridge crew worked quietly, efficiently. These were good people, hand-picked from the best Earth had to offer. Chief Science Officer Lisa Crawford sat at her station, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. Lisa had 3 advanced degrees and a mind that worked faster than most computers. She was already analyzing everything the sensors could detect. "Commander, I'm picking up some unusual energy readings ahead," Lisa said without looking up. "It's massive. Whatever it is, it's generating more power than our entire fleet combined." Before Jack could respond, the view screen filled with light. The crew gasped collectively. Stretching across the entire star system was a shimmering wall of blue and white energy. It pulsed like a living thing, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The barrier curved around the Velen homeworld and its 3 moons, a perfect sphere of pure force. "That's the Omega Barrier," came a rough voice over the communication channel. The screen split to show the scaled face of High Commander Zarthex, leader of the Velan Defense Forces. His reptilian features were sharp, his golden eyes gleaming with pride. "What you see before you has protected our people for 3,000 years. Not once has it been breached. Not once has it failed." Jack kept his expression neutral. "It's impressive, Commander Zarthex. We're honored that you've chosen to share this with us." Zarthex's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile. "You misunderstand, human. We have not brought you here simply to admire our achievement. We have brought you here to test yourselves against it." The bridge went silent. Jack felt his stomach tighten. "Test ourselves? The Galactic Council has concerns about humanity," Zarthex continued. "You are young, reckless, and your technology is primitive compared to the elder races. Some council members question whether you truly deserve full membership status." Lisa's hands clenched into fists, but she remained silent. Danny's jaw tightened. Jack could feel the tension radiating from his crew. Zarthex went on, seemingly enjoying himself. "Therefore, the Council has agreed to a challenge. If humanity can penetrate the Omega Barrier, you will prove your worth. If you fail, as 17 other species have failed before you, then Earth will become a client state under Council supervision." Jack took a slow breath. "And if we refuse this challenge? Then Earth's membership application will be denied. You will be restricted to your own star system for the next century while the Council evaluates your development." It wasn't really a choice at all. Jack knew that, and Zarthex knew it too. "How long do we have to prepare?" 60 of your Earth days. "We are not unreasonable." Zarthex's image flickered. "A docking port has been prepared for your ship. You may observe the barrier up close. Study it, analyze it, do whatever you wish. It will make no difference. The Omega Barrier has defeated every challenger for 3 millennia. It will defeat you as well." The communication ended. Jack stared at the massive energy field filling the view screen. Behind him, his crew waited for orders. "Bring us in," Jack said quietly. "Nice and easy. Lisa, I want every sensor we have focused on that barrier. Danny, pull up everything we have on previous attempts to breach it. Katie, prep a shuttle. We're going to get as close as the Velens will allow." Katie Sullivan, the ship's best pilot, grinned from her station. About time we had something interesting to do, sir. The horizon moved forward, approaching the glowing wall of energy. As they drew nearer, the barrier's true scale became apparent. It stretched in every direction, a perfect sphere with a radius of nearly 2 billion kilometers. The energy field itself was perhaps 100 meters thick, constantly shifting and flowing like water. I'm detecting multiple energy layers, Lisa reported. At least 12 distinct frequencies working in harmony. It's incredibly sophisticated. Each layer appears to reinforce the others. Jack watched as Lisa worked. What kind of power source could maintain something like this? According to the data the Velans provided, it draws energy from dimensional rifts. They've somehow learned to tap into the space between dimensions and convert that raw energy into a stable defensive field. Lisa shook her head in amazement. It's brilliant and terrifying. The Horizon docked at a Velan orbital station just outside the barrier. Jack assembled a team to tour the control facilities. The Velans were surprisingly cooperative, showing them everything about how the barrier operated. They had no fear of giving away secrets. Why would they? No one had ever beaten it. Engineer Kevin Torres, a stocky man with oil-stained hands and a genius-level understanding of alien technology, examined the control systems with wide eyes. This is at least 500 years beyond anything we have, he muttered. Maybe more. They stood in the main control room, watching technicians monitor the barrier's status. Holographic displays showed power levels, energy distribution, and threat assessment algorithms. The barrier is intelligent, explained a Velan technician named Corvus. It learns. When an object approaches, the artificial intelligence analyzes its properties and adapts the field to counter any threat. Energy weapons make it denser. Kinetic projectiles cause it to harden. It cannot be fooled or tricked. It simply responds to whatever comes at it and becomes immune. Danny studied the displays carefully. How fast does it adapt? Corvus's scales rippled with pride. Nearly instantaneous. The AI processes millions of calculations per second. It has been programmed with data from every known weapon, every form of attack, every type of approach that might threaten the system. Armor. But cosmic debris must pass through sometimes, Danny said. Asteroids, comets, space dust. The AI recognizes natural objects and allows them through. It would be wasteful to maintain maximum power against harmless material. Corvus gestured at a screen. See here? Small objects with no energy signature and natural trajectories are ignored. The barrier only activates against potential threats. Jack noticed Danny's thoughtful expression but said nothing. They spent hours studying the barrier, taking measurements, recording data. The Velans answered every question with the confidence of people who knew their fortress was unbeatable. That night, back on the horizon, Jack gathered his senior staff in the conference room. The mood was grim. All right, Jack said. Give it to me straight. Can we do this? Lisa pulled up holographic models of the barrier. Based on what we've seen, a direct assault is impossible. We don't have weapons powerful enough, and even if we did, the barrier would just adapt. Every species that tried to overwhelm it with force failed. What about finding a weakness in the code? Kevin suggested. Hacking the AI? The first week passed in a blur of frustration and failed theories. Lisa's science team ran simulation after simulation, and every single one ended the same way. The barrier adapted, strengthened, and repelled whatever they threw at it. The numbers didn't lie, and the numbers said humanity was facing the impossible. Jack found Lisa in the science lab at 3 a.m, surrounded by holographic displays showing failed attack patterns. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, and empty coffee cups littered her workspace. You should rest, Jack said gently. Lisa didn't look up. I've tried 97 different approaches. Particle beams, plasma weapons, exotic matter, gravitational distortion. The barrier counters everything within milliseconds. I even tried theoretical weapons we haven't invented yet. Still nothing. Maybe we're thinking about this wrong. How else should we think about it? It's a wall. We need to get through it. That's the whole problem. Lisa finally looked at him, and Jack saw the defeat in her eyes. Commander, I don't think we can do this. The Velans have had 3,000 years to perfect this system. We've had a week. Jack pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. Tell me about the 17 species that tried before us. Lisa pulled up the records. The Krell tried first, about 2,000 years ago. They used massive fusion bombs. The barrier absorbed the energy and used it to grow stronger. The Tharkon Collective tried to overload it with concentrated photon bursts. Same result. The Zentari Brotherhood attempted to phase through using dimensional shifting technology. The barrier simply expanded into those dimensions. They all tried to force their way through, Jack observed. What other option is there? You can't negotiate with a defensive system. You can't trick physics. Lisa rubbed her tired eyes. Every species that failed had better technology than we do. Some of them had been spacefaring for thousands of years. If they couldn't do it, how can we? Jack stood up. Get some sleep, Lisa. That's an order. We still have 53 days. But privately, Jack was beginning to wonder if 53 days or 53 years would make any difference. The situation got worse when Ambassador Kelthar arrived. The Mindor representative was a tall, thin being with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water. The Mindor species ran most of the Galactic Council's bureaucracy, and they took rules very seriously. Commander Morrison, Kelthar said in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. I have come to clarify the terms of your challenge. They met in the Horizons briefing room. Jack, Lisa, Danny, Kevin, and Katie all attended. Kelthar stood at the head of the table, looking down at them with large, dark eyes. The challenge is simple, Kelthar continued. You must penetrate the Omega Barrier and reach the inner system. How you accomplish this is your concern. However, certain methods are forbidden, such as, Jack asked, you may not destroy the barrier. You may not damage Velan property. You may not harm any Velan citizens. You may not use biological, chemical, or nuclear weapons. You may not attempt to bribe or coerce Velan personnel. Kelthar's 4 hands gestured in a complex pattern. Essentially, you must solve the puzzle as presented. Any attempt to circumvent the spirit of the challenge will result in immediate disqualification. Katie leaned forward. What counts as penetrating the barrier? Does our whole ship need to get through? A probe will suffice. As long as it crosses the barrier and enters the inner system, the challenge is met. Kelthar's expression, alien as it was, seemed almost sympathetic. I should tell you that the Council does not expect you to succeed. This challenge is designed to demonstrate humanity's limitations. Several Council members believe your species joined the galactic community too quickly. They see this as an opportunity to correct that mistake. And what do you believe? Jack asked. Kelthar was quiet for a moment. I believe the Council fears what it does not understand. Humanity is different from other species. This makes some uncomfortable. Personally, I find your unpredictability interesting. But interesting is not the same as capable. After the ambassador left, the team sat in heavy silence. They're setting us up to fail, Danny said quietly. This whole thing is rigged. Maybe, Jack admitted. But we still have to try. Kevin slammed his hand on the table. With what? We don't have super weapons. We don't have ancient technology. We're barely 200 years into space travel. What do we have that 17 more advanced species didn't? I don't know, Jack said honestly. But we'd better figure it out. The second week brought a breakthrough, though not the kind they wanted. Lisa discovered that the barrier's AI was even more sophisticated than they'd thought. It didn't just react to threats, it predicted them. Look at this. Lisa showed the team a recording of a Tharkon attack attempt from 800 years ago. The Tharkon fired a weapon, and the barrier adapted before the shot even arrived. The AI analyzed the weapon's energy signature during its charge cycle and prepared a countermeasure in advance. So it can see the future? Katie asked. No. But it can calculate probable outcomes faster than we can think. It reads the patterns of energy buildup, weapon trajectories, even the electromagnetic signatures of targeting systems. By the time you pull the trigger, It already knows what you're going to shoot and how to stop it. Danny had been studying the data quietly. What about the cosmic debris allowance? You said the barrier lets natural objects through. Only if they're truly natural, Lisa explained. No energy signature, no artificial materials, natural trajectory. The AI has a database of what constitutes normal space debris. Anything that doesn't match that profile gets flagged as a threat. Has anyone tried to disguise a weapon as debris? Danny asked. Kevin shook his head. The Zentari tried that. They built a probe using only natural materials, no power source, just drifting on momentum. But the moment it got close to the barrier, the AI detected the probe's artificial construction. Even without power, the molecular structure was too regular, too perfect. The barrier knew it was manufactured, so it's not just about energy, Danny said thoughtfully. It's about intent and design. Right. The AI is looking for purpose. Natural objects don't have purpose. They just exist and move according to physics. Lisa sighed. That's what makes this so impossible. We can't build something with purpose that also appears purposeless. The third week brought desperation. Jack authorized more aggressive testing. They launched probes at different angles, different speeds, different configurations. The barrier stopped them all. They tried quantum entanglement communication to see if they could slip a signal through. The barrier disrupted it. They attempted to use the Villan's own communication channels to piggyback data through. The AI caught that too. Katie started spending her free time in the observation deck, staring at the barrier. She watched the way it flowed and shifted, the patterns of light that danced across its surface. Something about it bothered her, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what. One night, Jack found her there, floating in zero gravity near the viewport. Can't sleep? He asked. Katie shook her head. I keep thinking there's something we're missing, something obvious. You and everyone else on this ship. You know what bothers me most? Katie turned to look at him. The Vellans showed us everything. They explained exactly how the barrier works. They even let us run tests against it. Why? Why be so helpful if they want us to fail? Jack had wondered the same thing. Maybe they want us to understand exactly how outmatched we are. Maybe it's a power play. Or maybe they legitimately can't imagine a way to beat it, Katie suggested. They've had 3,000 years to think about it. And they truly believe it's perfect. So they have no fear of showing us everything. That's not very encouraging. Katie smiled slightly. Maybe not. But it's interesting. They're so confident that they can't see their own blind spots. What blind spots? I don't know yet, but everyone has them. Every system has flaws. Sometimes the flaw isn't in the system itself but in the assumptions it's built on. Jack thought about that for a long time after Katie returned to her quarters. Assumptions. What assumptions had the Vellans made? What assumptions had humanity made? What were they all taking for granted that might not actually be true? By the fourth week, morale was sinking. The crew still worked hard, still ran tests and simulations, but the energy was draining away. They were going through the motions, doing their jobs, but the belief that they could actually succeed was fading. Jack called a meeting of the senior staff. They gathered in the conference room looking tired and defeated. I want honest opinions, Jack said. Should we keep trying? Or should we start preparing for the consequences of failure? Silence filled the room. Finally, Kevin spoke up. Commander, I've been an engineer for 20 years. I can fix almost anything, build almost anything. But this? I don't see how it's possible. Lisa? The science officer looked down at her hands. Every simulation says we fail. Every analysis says we can't do it. I want to believe otherwise. But I have to follow the data. Danny? The young tactical officer hesitated. I think we're asking the wrong question. Everyone turned to look at him. Danny shifted uncomfortably under their attention. We keep asking how to break through the barrier. But maybe that's not what we should be doing. Maybe we should be asking why the barrier exists in the first place. To protect the Velan system, Kevin said. Right. To protect against threats. But what if we're not a threat? What if we could make the barrier believe we're not a threat? Lisa frowned. The AI is too sophisticated for that. It would see through any deception. Would it? Danny pulled up the data on cosmic debris passage. The AI lets debris through because debris isn't a threat. What if we could make something that the AI genuinely, honestly believes is just debris? We tried that, Kevin reminded him. The Zentari tried it. The AI detected the artificial construction because they built a probe and tried to make it look natural. They started with purpose and tried to disguise it. Danny leaned forward. What if we do it backwards? What if we start with something natural and add purpose so carefully that the AI never notices the difference? Katie's eyes lit up. You're talking about hiding in plain sight. The change in approach brought new energy to the crew. Instead of trying to build bigger weapons or find clever hacks, they turned their attention to understanding exactly how natural debris behaved. Lisa's team began studying asteroids, comets, and space rocks with an intensity usually reserved for exotic particles. We need samples, Lisa announced at the morning briefing. Real cosmic debris from this system. We need to know exactly what the barrier considers normal. Jack authorized a mining expedition. Katie piloted a shuttle outside the barrier, collecting chunks of ice, rock, and metal that had been drifting through the Velan system for millions of years. The Velans watched with amusement but didn't interfere. They clearly thought the humans were grasping at straws. Back in the lab, Kevin and his engineering team took the samples apart, molecule by molecule. They measured density, composition, crystalline structure, radiation exposure, everything. They studied how the debris tumbled through space, how it reflected light, how it interacted with the system's magnetic fields. Look at this, Kevin said, showing Jack a piece of iron-rich rock under magnification. See these impact craters? This chunk has been floating around for eons, getting hit by smaller particles. Each collision left a mark. The surface is rough, irregular, full of character. Character, Jack repeated. Exactly. Natural objects aren't perfect. They have history written into them. Any probe we build from scratch will look too clean, too new. The AI will spot that instantly. Danny had been working with Lisa on the behavioral patterns. The debris that passes through the barrier follows specific paths. They're governed by the system's gravity wells, the solar wind, orbital mechanics. Nothing moves in a straight line. Everything tumbles and spirals. Can we calculate those patterns? Jack asked. We can predict them, but here's the problem. Danny pulled up a simulation. Natural movement has randomness built into it. A rock tumbling through space gets nudged by radiation pressure, tiny gravitational variations. Even the impact of individual atoms in the solar wind. It's chaos theory. We can predict the general path, but the exact movement is impossible to determine in advance. Katie had joined the discussion. So, if we fly a probe on a perfectly calculated path, it'll look artificial. Right. We need to add randomness. But not fake randomness. The AI is too smart for pseudorandom number generators. We need genuine, unpredictable variation, Lisa was already thinking. What if we don't try to fly the probe at all? What if we launch it and let physics do the rest? Use the actual forces acting on it to create natural movement? That could work, Danny said slowly. But we'd have no control. We couldn't steer it or adjust its course. We don't need to steer it, Katie argued. We just need it to pass through the barrier. Once it's through, the challenge is met. Jack listened to his crew talk through the problems, finding solutions, building on each other's ideas. This was what humanity did best. Not overwhelming force, but cooperation and creativity. The work intensified. Kevin's team began building a probe, but not in the traditional way. Instead of manufacturing parts, they started with actual cosmic debris. They took a chunk of rock that had been floating in space for millions of years and carefully, painstakingly, hollowed out a tiny space inside it. The outside has to remain completely natural, Kevin explained as he worked with precision tools that operated at the molecular level. We're only modifying the interior, and even then, we're using materials that naturally occur in this type of rock. Iron for the electronics, silicon for the computing components, carbon for the power storage. How small are we talking? Jack asked. Very small. The entire probe will be about the size of a marble. Any bigger, and we risk the AI detecting the hollowed-out interior. Kevin wiped sweat from his forehead. We're basically building a computer from naturally occurring materials. It won't be fast or powerful, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to cross the barrier and send back a signal. Lisa's team worked on the energy signature problem. Any active power source will give us away, she said. Batteries, reactors, even chemical cells. The AI will detect the organized energy pattern. So how do we power it? Danny asked. We don't. Not in the traditional sense. Lisa showed them a design. We use stored potential energy. Specifically, we use the molecular bonds in certain compounds that naturally form in space. When the probe needs to transmit a signal, it breaks those bonds, releasing energy. From the outside, it just looks like normal radiation, the kind that occurs when cosmic rays hit certain materials. Will that give us enough power to transmit? One short burst, that's all we get. But that's all we need. Ryan Baker, the navigation officer, worked on trajectory calculations. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke up in meetings. But his mathematical skills were extraordinary. He spent days mapping the gravitational fields, solar radiation, and magnetic currents in the Velen system. I've found a path, he announced during a late-night session. If we launch from specific coordinates at a precise velocity, the probe will naturally drift toward the barrier. The sun's radiation will give it a slight push, and the system's largest gas giant will provide a gravity assist. How precise is precise? Jack asked. Ryan showed him the numbers. We have a margin of error of about 0.3 meters per second on the launch velocity. Any faster or slower, and the probe misses the optimal passage point. Katie whistled. That's tight. It gets worse. The launch window only lasts for 42 seconds. Miss that, and we have to wait another 16 days for the orbital mechanics to line up again. Jack looked at the calendar. They had 12 days left until the deadline. If they missed the first launch window, they wouldn't get a second chance. The probe took shape over the next week. It was an ugly little thing. A lumpy piece of space rock that looked like a million other chunks floating through the void. Only the most sophisticated sensors could detect the tiny hollows inside where Kevin had placed the components. It's beautiful, Katie said, examining the finished product. Kevin laughed. It's a rock. Exactly. It's the most convincing rock I've ever seen. The day before the launch, Lisa ran final simulations. The numbers were terrifying. They had a 14% chance of success. 14%? After weeks of work? After every mind on the ship had contributed their best ideas. Jack found himself in the observation deck again, staring at the Omega barrier. It pulsed with blue light. Beautiful. And implacable. Somewhere beyond that wall were the Velen worlds, protected by technology that humanity couldn't match. Second thoughts? Katie appeared beside him. Third and fourth thoughts too, Jack admitted. 14% isn't good odds. It's better than 0. That's what we had a month ago. Katie floated closer to the viewport. You know what I realized? The Velens think the barrier makes them safe. They've spent 3,000 years hiding behind it. And they've convinced themselves that hiding is strength. It's kept them safe. Has it? Or has it just kept them isolated? They've had the same territory, the same resources, the same everything for 3,000 years. They haven't grown. They haven't explored. They built the perfect defense and then stopped moving forward. Katie turned to look at him. Humans don't do that. We can't. It's not in our nature. Even when we build walls, we're always looking for what's on the other side. Jack smiled slightly. That's a generous interpretation of our nosiness. Maybe. But it's also our strength, The Velans built something unbeatable and decided they were done. We're about to throw a rock at it and hope for the best. That's pretty human. The launch day arrived. The entire crew gathered on the bridge, even those off duty. The Velans had been notified and were watching with their usual confidence. Ambassador Kelthar had sent observers. The Galactic Council wanted a full report of humanity's failure. Jack stood at the center of the bridge, feeling the weight of every eye on him. This wasn't just about one challenge anymore. This was about whether humanity would be allowed to grow, to explore, to find their place among the stars. Failure meant isolation. Success meant possibility. All stations ready? Jack asked. The responses came quickly. Lisa at science. Danny at tactical. Kevin monitoring the probe. Ryan at navigation. Katie sat at the pilot station, her hands steady on the controls. Launch window opens in 60 seconds, Ryan announced. Probe is loaded. Trajectory calculated. Velocity programmed. The seconds ticked down. Jack watched the countdown. His heart steady despite the tension. Win or lose, humanity would face the outcome, standing tall. Launch window open, Ryan said. Velocity must be exactly 43.7 meters per second. Course 271 by Mark IV. Katie's hands moved across the controls. The ship rotated slowly, lining up the launch tube. Position locked. Velocity locked. Ready for launch on your command, sir. Jack took a breath. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he thought about all the species that had tried this before. 17 civilizations, some of them thousands of years older than humanity, all defeated by the same barrier. Who were humans to think they could succeed where so many others had failed? But then again, who were humans if not the species who kept trying anyway? Launch the probe, Jack ordered. Katie pressed the control. There was a soft thump as compressed air pushed the probe out of the launch tube. No rockets, no engines. Nothing that would leave an energy signature. Just a rock, tumbling into space. On the view screen, they could barely see it. A small, dark object spinning slowly against the stars. It looked like nothing. It looked like debris. It looked exactly like what they hoped it would look like. Trajectory is good, Ryan reported. The probe is following the predicted path. Solar radiation is providing the expected push. Gravity assist from the gas giant will occur in 6 hours. 6 hours of waiting. 6 hours of watching a rock drift through space. 6 hours of knowing that 17 other species had failed this same challenge. Lisa monitored the probe's progress with every sensor they had. Energy signature is minimal. It's radiating heat at the same rate as normal debris. No electromagnetic emissions. Composition readings match natural space rock. She paused. So far, it's perfect. The hours crawled by. The crew stayed at their stations. Watching. Waiting. No one wanted to leave. Even for a moment. This was history being made, one way or another. Gravity assist complete, Ryan said as the probe swung around the massive gas giant. Course is good. The probe is heading straight for the barrier. Impact in 90 minutes. Jack felt his pulse quicken. 90 minutes. After all the work, all the planning, all the hope and fear. They were 90 minutes away from knowing if they'd succeeded or failed. The bridge of the horizon was silent except for the soft hum of instruments. Every eye watched the main view screen where the Omega barrier filled the display. The probe was too small to see, but the sensors tracked it as a tiny blip moving toward the massive energy field. 50 seconds, Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. On a secondary screen, they could see the Velan control room. High Commander Zarthex stood with his arms crossed, watching with the same expression he'd worn for weeks. Confident. Bored. Almost. He had seen this before, 17 times. In his mind, the outcome was already decided. Behind him, Velan technicians monitored their instruments. Their barrier had never failed. It would not fail now, certainly not against these young humans with their primitive technology. 40 seconds. Jack's hands gripped the armrests of his command chair. He forced himself to breathe normally, to project calm even though his heart was pounding. Leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about showing the crew that failure was survivable, that uncertainty was normal. Katie had her eyes closed, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer or maybe just calculations. Danny sat perfectly still, watching the tactical display. Kevin had both hands pressed against his console, as if he could will the probe forward through sheer determination. 30 seconds. Probe trajectory remains nominal. Tumble rate is within expected parameters for natural debris. Ryan spoke without looking away from his navigation screens. The probe is being affected by the barrier's gravitational distortion. Minor course correction occurring naturally. This is expected. 20 seconds. The Velen control room showed increased activity. Technicians were pointing at screens, having quick conversations. One of them said something to Zarthex, who leaned forward to look at a display. The barrier's AI is beginning preliminary analysis, Lisa reported. Energy scanners are sweeping the probe. It's detecting a small object approaching on a natural trajectory. So far, the AI is classifying it as cosmic debris. 15 seconds. Jack felt sweat on his palms. 15 seconds felt like forever. He had been in combat, had made split-second decisions that meant life or death. But somehow this was harder. In combat, you could fight back. Here, they could only watch. 10 seconds. The AI is conducting a detailed scan. On the Velen screen, more technicians had gathered around a central display. Zarthex was standing now, his scaled face showing the first hint of uncertainty. Something about the readings bothered him. The probe's energy signature matches natural space debris, Lisa said, reading data as fast as it came in. Composition is consistent with iron-rich asteroids common to this system. Surface features show appropriate age and impact damage. 5 seconds. Katie opened her eyes. Come on, come on, come on. The AI is running final threat assessment calculations. It's analyzing the tumble pattern, the trajectory history, the radiation profile. 3 seconds. The probe reached the outer edge of the barrier. The energy field shimmered, responding to the approaching object. The AI had microseconds to make a decision. Threat or not a threat? Stop or allow? 2 seconds. In the Velen control room, alarms began to sound. Zarthex shouted something, pointing at screens. Technicians scrambled, their clawed hands flying over controls. 1 second. The AI has made its classification. Time seemed to stop. The probe touched the barrier, and Jack held his breath, waiting for the flash of energy that would vaporize their carefully disguised rock. Waiting for the failure that everyone expected. The barrier rippled, and the probe passed through. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The bridge crew stared at the screens in disbelief. The probe has penetrated the barrier, Lisa said in a stunned voice. It's inside the defensive perimeter. The AI classified it as non-threatening debris and allowed passage. The bridge erupted. Katie let out a whoop of joy. Kevin punched the air. Danny laughed, actually laughed. Something Jack had rarely heard from the serious young officer. Even Ryan cracked a smile. Jack felt a wave of relief so powerful, it almost knocked him out of his chair. They had done it. Humanity had solved a problem that 17 other species couldn't crack, not with superior weapons or ancient technology, but with creativity and the sheer stubbornness to try something everyone said was impossible. The probe is transmitting, Lisa reported over the celebration. We're receiving its signal from inside the barrier. The challenge is complete. On the Velen screen, chaos reigned. Zarthex was shouting orders while technicians ran diagnostic checks on the barrier's AI. They looked like people who had just watched the impossible happen. Get me Zarthex, Jack ordered, straightening his uniform. The celebration quieted as the crew returned to their stations, professionalism reasserting itself. Even though everyone was grinning, Zarthex's face appeared on the main screen. His golden eyes were wide, his pupils dilated in what Jack had learned was a Velen expression of shock. How? Zarthex demanded. What deception did you use? What trick? The barrier's logs show no weapons discharge, no energy manipulation, no quantum effects. Our sensors detected nothing but a simple piece of cosmic debris. Jack kept his face neutral. That's because it was cosmic debris, Commander. We didn't trick your barrier. We simply gave it exactly what it was programmed to allow through. Impossible. That rock carried a transmitter. Your AI is designed to detect threats, Jack said calmly. We weren't a threat. We built our probe from materials that naturally occur in your system. We powered it with chemical bonds that form naturally in space. We let physics determine its path, instead of flying it with engines. From the AI's perspective, we were just another piece of debris, because that's what we made ourselves. Zarthex's scales rippled with agitation. You avoided the challenge. The test was to penetrate the barrier, not to sneak through it like thieves. The test, Jack said firmly, was to get something through your barrier. You never specified how we had to do it. You said we could use any method we wanted, as long as we didn't damage the barrier or harm Valan citizens. We followed every rule you set. Every. Before Zarthex could respond, another transmission came through. Ambassador Kielthar's shimmering form appeared on a split screen. The Galactic Council has been monitoring this test, Kelthar said in their wind chime voice. We must deliberate on whether humanity's method constitutes a legitimate solution. Katie made a disgusted sound. Danny's jaw tightened. Jack felt anger rise in his chest, but forced it down. Deliberate all you want, Jack said evenly. Our probe is inside the Valan defensive perimeter. We met the challenge as stated. If the Council wants to change the rules after we've already won, that says more about the Council than it does about humanity. Kelthar's forearms moved in patterns Jack didn't recognize. Commander Morrison, you must understand the Council's concern. 17 species attempted this challenge using direct approaches, military force, advanced technology, complex strategies. You succeeded by essentially hiding. We succeeded by thinking differently, Jack corrected. Every other species assumed the barrier needed to be broken or overpowered. We recognized it as an intelligent system, with specific programming, and worked within those parameters. That's not hiding. That's problem solving. It's cheating, Zarthex growled. It's innovation. Katie called out from her station. Jack shot her a look. But she was right. And he knew it. You claim your barrier was impenetrable, Jack continued. You showed us everything about how it worked because you were absolutely certain no one could get through it. We proved you wrong, not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we approached the problem from an angle you never considered. That's what humanity brings to the Council. Fresh perspectives, new ideas, the willingness to question assumptions. The Valan control room had quieted. Zarthex stood rigid, his pride clearly wounded. But Jack noticed something else in the commander's expression. Something that might have been respect. You said no species had ever defeated the Omega barrier in 3,000 years, Jack said more gently. But that's not quite true. Is it? No species had ever tried to work with the barrier instead of against it. You built a perfect guard dog, and then were surprised when someone offered it a treat instead of trying to fight it. Zarthex was quiet for a long moment. The Council will not see it that way. They will say, you exploited a loophole. Then the Council needs to learn to write better challenges, Danny muttered, quiet enough that only the bridge crew heard. Several people tried to hide smiles. Kelthar's image flickered. The Council is convening an emergency session. You will be summoned to present your case. I suggest you prepare a strong argument. Commander Morrison, several Council members are already calling for your disqualification. The transmission ended. The bridge crew looked at Jack, waiting for his response. Well, Jack said after a moment, I guess we'd better get ready to argue with bureaucrats. Lisa, I want a complete technical breakdown of exactly what we did and why it was legitimate. Danny, pull up the exact wording of the challenge parameters. Kevin, make sure we have all the data from the probe's passage. Katie, Ryan, start putting together a presentation that even a politician can understand. What are you going to do, sir? Katie asked. Jack smiled grimly. I'm going to remind the Galactic Council why they invited humanity to join in the first place. We don't do things the way everyone else does. That's not a bug, that's a feature. Over the next hours, the Horizon received dozens of transmissions. Some were from council members demanding explanations. Others were from various alien species. Some congratulating humanity. Others accusing them of dishonesty. The human embassy on the council homeworld reported protests from conservative factions who wanted Earth's membership revoked, but there were also unexpected messages of support. A scientist from the Krell Collective, whose species had failed the same challenge 2,000 years ago, sent a message saying they wished they'd thought of humanity's approach. A Tharkon captain transmitted simple words, "Well done." Most surprising was a private communication from a low-level Velen engineer named Korvas, the same technician who had shown them around the barrier control systems. "What you did was brilliant," Korvas said in the message. "Our people have hidden behind that barrier for so long. We forgot that there are other solutions besides defense. You reminded us that walls can protect, but they can also imprison. Thank you for that lesson." Jack read the message twice. Maybe this challenge was about more than just proving humanity's worth. Maybe it was about showing the established species that their old ways weren't the only ways. The council summons arrived. Humanity had 12 hours to present their case. The fate of Earth's membership hung in the balance. Jack gathered his crew one more time. Here's what's going to happen. The council is going to try to discredit what we did. They're going to call it cheating, deception, exploitation of loopholes. Some of them genuinely believe that. Others are just afraid of change. So how do we handle it? Lisa asked. We tell them the truth, Jack said simply. We approached an impossible problem with creativity and lateral thinking. We didn't break their rules. We didn't damage their barrier. We didn't harm anyone. We found a clever solution to a difficult challenge. And if the council punishes creativity and innovation, then maybe they're not the kind of organization humanity should be part of anyway. Katie grinned. That's either very brave or very stupid, sir. Probably both, Jack admitted. But it's honest. And I'd rather lose honestly than win by pretending to be something we're not. The council chamber was enormous. A massive sphere floating in space with transparent walls offering views of the stars beyond. Representatives from 43 species sat in their designated sections, their forms ranging from vaguely humanoid to completely alien. Some breathed oxygen. Others methane. Some communicated with sound. Others with light or chemical signals. Translation systems hummed, converting each species' language into forms the others could understand. Jack Morrison stood in the center of the chamber, his crew arranged behind him. He wore his dress uniform, freshly pressed, with the Earth Defense insignia on his shoulder. Lisa, Danny, Kevin, Katie, and Ryan stood at attention, representing not just themselves but all of humanity. Above them, in the highest seat, sat Elder Korvash of the Mindor, the council's current chairman. Kelthar stood nearby, ready to present the case against humanity. This emergency session is called to order, Korvash said, their voice echoing through translation systems. We are here to address the question of humanity's recent actions regarding the Velen Barrier Challenge. Ambassador Kelthar, present your argument. Kelthar moved to the center platform. Thank you, Elder. The facts are simple. 17 species over 3,000 years have attempted the Velen Barrier Challenge. Each approached it with honor, using their finest technology and military capabilities. Each was defeated by the superior Velen defenses, as was appropriate. Jack noticed how Kelthar framed it. Not that those species failed, but that they lost honorably. Humanity, however, chose a different path. Kelthar continued. Rather than face the barrier directly, they employed deception. They disguised a probe as natural debris, exploiting a safety feature designed to allow harmless cosmic material through the defensive field. This is not a demonstration of capability. It is an exploitation of loopholes. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement. Others remained silent. Furthermore, Kelthar said, this approach demonstrates a concerning trait in humanity. Rather than solving problems through direct means, they seek shortcuts. They circumvent challenges instead of overcoming them. This is not the behavior of a species ready for full council membership. If I may respond? Jack asked calmly. Chorvash gestured assent. Jack stepped forward, his heart steady despite the weight of 43 species watching him. Ambassador Kelthar is correct about one thing. We didn't approach this challenge the same way other species did. We didn't try to build bigger weapons or develop more advanced technology. We examined the problem, understood the system we were facing, and found a solution that worked within the parameters we were given. Jack paused. And yes, those 17 other species lost honorably. They also lost completely. More murmurs, though Jack couldn't tell if they were supportive or critical. The challenge was simple, Jack continued. Penetrate the Omega barrier. We were told we could use any method as long as we didn't damage the barrier, harm Velen citizens, or use prohibited weapons. We followed every rule. We broke no laws. We simply thought about the problem differently than others had. You deceived the barrier's artificial intelligence, Kelthar interrupted. You made it believe you were something you were not. We became something we were not, Jack corrected. There's a difference. We built a probe from natural materials, powered it with naturally occurring chemical reactions, and let it follow a natural trajectory. From any objective standpoint, it was cosmic debris. The fact that we carefully selected which piece of cosmic debris to use and where to send it doesn't change what it fundamentally was. A new voice spoke up. It came from the Krell section. A massive representative with 6 legs and a body covered in thick armor plating. I am War Leader Throck of the Krell Collective. 2,000 years ago, my ancestors attempted this same challenge. We brought our most powerful fusion weapons and bombarded the barrier with everything we had. We failed. The Krell's mandibles clicked. We lost honorably, but we lost. I see no honor in failure. The humans succeeded. That is what matters. War Leader Throck. This is not about success or failure, Kelthar argued. It is about the method of success. The challenge was designed to test military capability and technological advancement. Was it? Jack asked. Because that's not what you told us. You said the challenge would prove whether humanity deserved council membership. You never specified that we had to prove it through military might. You never said we had to match the Velen's technology. You simply said we had to get through the barrier. Jack pulled up a holographic display showing the exact wording of the challenge. Quote, any species attempting membership must demonstrate capability, creativity, and determination by penetrating the Omega barrier through any means they choose. End quote. We demonstrated capability by building a probe that could fool sophisticated AI. We demonstrated creativity by approaching the problem from an unexpected angle. We demonstrated determination by working for 60 straight days to find a solution. We met every requirement. A crystalline being from the Zentari Brotherhood spoke, their voice like chiming bells. The humans make a valid point about the wording. However, there is a matter of spirit versus letter. The challenge has always been understood as a test of military capability. Understood by whom? Lisa spoke up. But she continued, forgive me, but I'm a scientist. I deal in facts, not assumptions. The challenge, as stated, never mentioned military capability. That's an assumption that previous challengers made, an assumption that led to their failure. Danny stepped forward. If I may add something, I've studied the records of all 17 previous attempts. Every single one assumed they needed to overpower the barrier. They approached it as an enemy to be defeated. But the barrier isn't an enemy, it's a tool. A very sophisticated tool with specific programming and specific responses. You speak of our greatest defensive achievement as if it were a simple machine. Zarthex's voice came through the communication system. The Velan commander appeared on a screen, broadcasting from his home system. The Omega barrier is the product of 3,000 years of development. The Omega barrier, and it's brilliant, Danny said respectfully. The AI is incredibly sophisticated. The adaptive response is nearly perfect. That's exactly why we couldn't beat it with force. So we didn't try. We worked with it instead. Zarthex was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his tone was different. Less aggressive. You studied my barrier not as a wall to break down, but as a system to understand. Yes, Jack said. Because that's what it is. Your people built something amazing. We respected that. We just understood it differently than you expected. The Council must consider precedent, Kelthar insisted. If we allow humanity's approach, we set a precedent that challenges can be avoided through clever wordplay and technical loopholes. Every future challenge could be undermined. Or, Katie spoke up, you set a precedent that innovation is valued, that thinking differently is rewarded, that there's more than one way to solve a problem. Korvash raised a hand for silence. We will hear from High Commander Zarthex. As the creator and operator of the Omega Barrier, his perspective is crucial. The screen showing Zarthex expanded. The Velon commander looked different than he had during previous communications. Less arrogant. More thoughtful. I have spent the past hours examining what the humans did, Zarthex said slowly. At first, I was angry. I felt they had cheated, exploited my barrier's weakness. But then I realized something. The Omega Barrier has no weakness. It performed exactly as designed. It analyzed an approaching object, determined it was non-threatening cosmic debris, and allowed it through. The humans did not break my barrier. They did not hack it. They did not find a flaw in its programming. Zarthex paused. They understood what it was designed to do and worked within those parameters. That is not a weakness in the barrier. That is a weakness in how we think about the barrier. For 3,000 years, my people have relied on it to keep us safe. We became so confident in its strength that we stopped thinking about alternatives. We stopped innovating. We built the perfect wall and then hid behind it. The council chamber was silent. Jack could hardly believe what he was hearing. The humans did something no other species attempted, Zarthex continued. They looked at the situation and asked, not how do we break through, but how does this system work and how can we use that knowledge? That is exactly the kind of thinking the Council needs. Species who can find solutions instead of just using force. High Commander, Kelthar said, surprise evident in their tone. Are you suggesting we approve humanity's membership? I am suggesting that humanity passed a test more important than the one we intended, Zarthex said. They showed us that our assumptions can limit us, that confidence can become arrogance, that there is always another way to think about a problem. He paused. Also, I would like to request that Earth scientists work with my team to improve the Omega Barrier. Clearly, we have blind spots we need to address. Jack felt a surge of hope. An unexpected ally had emerged from the most unlikely source. Korvash surveyed the council. We will now vote. The question is simple. Did humanity legitimately complete the Velon Barrier Challenge, thereby demonstrating their worthiness for full council membership? The voting process was complex, each species casting their decision through their own method. Lights, sounds, chemical signals, all translated into simple yes or no tallies on the central display. Jack watched the numbers climb. 15 yes, 20 yes, 25. The no votes accumulated too, but slower. 30 yes, 35. The final tally appeared, 37 yes, 6 no. The vote is decided, Korvash announced. Humanity's completion of the Velon Barrier Challenge is recognized as legitimate. Earth's full membership in the Galactic Council is hereby confirmed. The human crew remained professional, but Jack could see the relief and joy in their eyes. They had done it. Not just completed the challenge, but defended their approach against the entire council. However, Korvash continued, and Jack's heart sank slightly, the council recognizes that humanity's approach has raised important questions about how we structure challenges and evaluate capabilities. We will be forming a committee to review and potentially revise our testing procedures. Commander Morrison, we would appreciate human input on this committee. We'd be honored, Jack said. Over the following days, the implications of humanity's success rippled through the galaxy. News spread quickly. The species that had failed the same challenge centuries or millennia ago had mixed reactions. Some were embarrassed. Others were intrigued. A few reached out to Earth directly, wanting to learn more about human problem-solving methods. The Valan government officially invited Lisa's science team to their home world. Kevin Torres was offered a position working on barrier technology. Danny received requests from 3 different species military academies to give lectures on tactical thinking. Katie became something of a celebrity among pilots across the galaxy. Her technique of adding natural randomness to flight patterns opened new fields of research in evasive maneuvering and stealth technology. Ryan's mathematical models were published in galactic scientific journals, and universities requested copies of his trajectory calculations. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The phrase, "humans said, watch this," entered common usage across multiple species. It was used whenever someone attempted something unconventional, something that broke from traditional thinking. Sometimes it was said with admiration. Sometimes with amusement. But always with the acknowledgement that humans approached problems differently. Back on Earth, celebrations erupted. Humanity's place among the stars was secure. The restrictions that had kept Earth confined were lifted. New exploration missions launched. Trade agreements were signed. Exchange programs brought human students to alien universities and alien students to Earth institutions. Jack Morrison received a promotion to Fleet Admiral and was put in charge of humanity's expansion division. His first act was to ensure that every ship in the fleet had a diverse crew, mixing people with different backgrounds, different specialties, different ways of thinking. The Horizon's success had proven that the best solutions came from combining different perspectives. 6 months after the barrier challenge, Jack stood in his new office on Earth, looking out at the stars. The Omega Barrier was billions of miles away. But he thought about it often. That glowing blue wall that had seemed so impossible. A message came through. It was from Zarthex. The Velen commander had become an unlikely friend, frequently exchanging ideas about defensive systems and tactical innovation. Admiral Morrison, the message read, I wanted to update you on our progress. We have modified the Omega Barrier's AI based on insights from your team. It can now better distinguish between genuine threats and peaceful passage. We have also begun training our people to think more flexibly about security. Your probe taught us that the best defense is not just strong walls, but smart thinking. Thank you for the lesson. And please, next time you humans decide to do something impossible, perhaps warn us first. Watching you work is exhausting. Jack smiled. He sent a reply. Where's the fun in that? Besides, you know what humans say when we see something impossible. The response came quickly. Yes, I know. You say watch this. I suppose we have learned to watch more carefully. Jack closed the message and looked back at the stars. Somewhere out there were new challenges, new problems that seemed impossible. And somewhere, humans were already planning unconventional solutions, already asking questions nobody else thought to ask, already refusing to accept that impossible meant impossible. The galaxy was full of species with ancient technology and powerful weapons, but only humans had perfected the art of looking at an unbeatable challenge and responding with 4 simple words. Watch this. The end. The crew nodded. They understood. This was about more than one challenge. More than one ship. This was about whether humanity would be allowed to be human. Weird and creative and unpredictable and innovative. Get some rest, Jack ordered. Tomorrow, we show the galaxy what humans do best. We stand up, speak our truth, and refuse to apologize for being ourselves. As the crew dispersed, Jack looked out at the Omega Barrier one last time. It still glowed with blue light, still pulsed with power. But now there was a probe on the other side. A tiny piece of human ingenuity that had slipped past the galaxy's most sophisticated defense. The barrier wasn't impenetrable after all. It just needed someone willing to think differently. Tomorrow, The Galactic Council would decide humanity's fate. But tonight, Jack allowed himself to feel proud of his species. They might be young and primitive by galactic standards, but they had spirit, they had creativity, they had the audacity to look at the impossible and say, "Watch this." The probe tumbled through space, just another piece of cosmic debris on a random path through the void. Inside that ugly rock was humanity's best effort, their cleverest trick, their desperate gamble. It wasn't much to look at, but then again, humans had never been much to look at either. They were a young species, barely out of their home system, facing challenges that ancient civilizations couldn't solve. They had no right to think they could succeed. Katie had been right, though. Humans didn't build walls and stop. They built walls and then immediately started wondering what was on the other side. And if they couldn't go over, under, or around the wall, they found another way. Sometimes, they threw rocks and hoped for the best. "Probe approaching the barrier," Lisa said quietly. 60 seconds to contact. More than that, I'm talking about becoming part of the background noise. Making ourselves so ordinary, so expected, that we're invisible. Jack felt something stir in his chest. Hope? Maybe. Or just the refusal to give up. Can we do that? I don't know, Danny admitted, but it's the only approach we haven't tried. Lisa was already pulling up data, her mind racing through possibilities. It would require perfect mimicry. Every aspect would need to be exactly like natural debris: energy signature, composition, trajectory, tumble rate. Even the slightest variation would trigger the AI. "So we make it perfect," Katie said. Kevin rubbed his face. "That's insane. The margin for error would be microscopic." "Try." Jack looked around the table at his crew. They were tired, frustrated, and facing impossible odds. They were also the best Earth had to offer, and they weren't giving up yet. "We have 3 weeks left," Jack said. "Let's spend them trying something insane. Because playing it safe sure hasn't worked." "The system is completely isolated," Lisa replied. "No external connections. You'd have to physically access the core computer, which is on the other side of the barrier." The room fell silent. Katie leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. Danny tapped his fingers on the table, his mind clearly working through possibilities. "There has to be a way," Jack said finally. "Humans didn't get to the stars by giving up when things looked impossible. We've got 60 days. Let's use them. I want ideas, no matter how crazy they sound, because right now, crazy might be our only option." The crew dispersed, each returning to their stations to begin the seemingly impossible task of finding a way through a barrier that had never been breached. As Jack stood alone in the conference room, staring at the image of the Omega barrier, he couldn't shake one thought. The Velans had shown them everything because they truly believed it was unbeatable. Maybe it was time to show them what happened when humans refused to accept defeat.